My father understood the necessary combination of suffering and joy. And I think that's why he was so good at what he did, both as an educator, but also as a tip volunteer. That trauma was a part of life.
His gratification, if any, was hearing 5 years, 10 years down the road what a student did with the information that he taught them. And that's all he cared about. Just do something with what I'm teaching you.
He was a professor at Warner Pacific. Fazio became the biggest advocate that I personally have ever had in TIP. He went back to the college and fostered this partnership, this relationship.
He served in Vietnam. He was drafted. He was decorated with a Purple Heart. And he returned home with things he couldn't speak about, like many veterans. Instead of perhaps turning in on himself, he turned that so-called trauma, which is to say, what war introduces to the human soul, outward. And it made him capable of walking into spaces of suffering with others with a tremendous amount of courage.
He was the one that pulled us all together after the Reynolds School shooting, after the Umpqua shooting. When we had big emotional calls where we were giving it our all, he would put an all call out at the college and get as many TIP volunteers as he could, and they would carpool together to the school and do their thing.
But we're in a moment now where trauma and unrest and dis-ease comes from all directions. The idea that TIP has created a kind of service award that's specifically for educators, it's perfect. I can't imagine anything that could better honor what he was fundamentally about. I think he understood love as action. All that he'd been given for expertise fundamentally didn't mean anything until it could be practiced. And TIP provided a space for him to practice. And my father left this world, I think, knowing in his soul he left things behind that would go on beyond him.
His passion was about education and mentoring and building up the youth to be the best they could be. We in TIP really wanted to memorialize him, to honor him. One of our Good Samaritan Awards every year would be called the Dr. John Fazio Legacy Award, so we could keep his memory alive.
James and Amy are amazing human beings. I truly don't think that I would be as healthy as a human being as I am without those two, with what we've had to face in this community over the last several years. When we lost two students within less than 24 hours of each other, that was an impact that really shook us.
It's hard for us at any age to understand how somebody young could die, but particularly for young people, it's really difficult.
I think they've got a tremendous amount of courage. They show up every day. They show up to every crisis. Portland Public Schools, and frankly the whole Portland community, are so fortunate to have Amy and James on their team.
When we show up in the wake of a crisis or tragedy, most often individuals are dysregulated, understandably so. And sometimes they're just looking for something to tether to.
Schools have to continue to open their doors, right? And to run. For teams to have to be managing all of this in the most awful of times, to then have TIP there to be able to hold space to make sure students and staff are getting what they need is really powerful.
We have called TIP more times than I can count now. And to their credit, June and Jordan have never said no. So we just remain so deeply grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Portland Public Schools and the Trauma Intervention Program have a great relationship, and a big part of that is James and Amy. I think over time there's developed a really nice mutual trust, and whatever the circumstances, James and Amy know how to respond. They are out there, they're supporting people in every one of those schools when there's something really difficult going on.
We are extremely grateful to have James and Amy, extremely grateful. And I know it's not just McDaniel, I know it's the entire PPS community. They really are extraordinary.
So when you think about the death of a student or a teacher multiplied by every school in the Portland Public School system, and James and Amy were the core behind all of that. They exemplified what Dr. John Fazio brought. The inaugural Dr. John Fazio Legacy Award from Portland Public School, James Loveland and Amy Ruona.